Hey guys, this is Justin. Welcome to another video. Today we'll be chatting Chapter 24 of The Mandalorian, the season finale of Season 3. And I definitely have some mixed feelings, I guess, as you could probably tell if you watched my reaction. So since then, I slept on it, I watched the episode again, and those mixed feelings are still around, mostly, which tells me that they're probably valid and will probably remain. My issue with this as a season finale is that there just really wasn't a whole lot there, and what was there wasn't often executed well. I said this to Corey during the live stream. If you asked me to describe what I expected to see in the Mandalorian season finale, I would have pretty much given you a brief rundown of what actually contained in the episode. When I watch something, I want to be surprised. I want to be shocked by something. That didn't happen here. This episode was played extraordinarily safe to, I think, the detriment of the season. Now listen, in some ways it's actually refreshing that they didn't rely on cameos like Boba Fett showing up to help please fans. But it's frustrating that so much was developed in the earlier parts of the season that just wasn't paid off at all in the finale. We hear about dark forces gathering. We don't get anything in the finale. We are introduced to the new Imperial Remnant factions. Again, nothing. Now, I'm assuming other shows will be picking up those plot threads, but it's just really odd. I actually didn't mind that the Mythosaur hasn't yet made its appearance, but you can definitely refer to that as well. Everything just felt very rushed, which is bizarre, and Making Star Wars posted an article before the season came out about the Mandalorian having a difficult production, and I'm guessing that must have been true. Looking at the format of the episode, it just starts off in a really nonsensical way. We see at the end of the prior chapter that the Mandalorian has been kidnapped by Moff Gideon. That scene was already a bit weird because we don't get any reaction shots from Grogu or anything. This episode, Gideon apparently abandons the Mandalorian. He leaves him with two inept guards, and he's rescued by Grogu, who comes out of nowhere to save him. It just makes no sense. Bo-Katan didn't realize Grogu wasn't with the group. How did he get into these secure passageways? It's just really weird, and it's just clearly a method to separate Grogu and the Mandalorian from the rest of the crew. I think it would have been more emotionally impactful to have him choose to go and take Grogu to hunt down Gideon, because if you're just going to have him be saved immediately, pretty much off screen, like not quite off screen, but as close to off screen as you can get without it being so, what's the point? And I mean, this wasn't the only issue that was hand waved away, not just in this episode, but throughout the entire season. Like, what happened to all the other Imperial forces that were on Mandalore? There were enough TIE fighters and TIE bombers to make the lives of the Mandalorians on the surface hell. What happened to them? I mean, what happened to the rest of the Mandalorian fleet? The end of episode concept art shows that the space battle was initially meant to be significantly larger, with the Kazantis involved. I mean, there were Fang fighters. There's even, I believe, a TIE Interceptor versus Fan Fighter Lego set designed for the Mandalorian Season 3. We see the Fang fighters in the background, but nothing else. It's, I think, just a really clear indication that they weren't able to successfully pull off their vision, which is disappointing. What did largely work for the episode, however, was the actual retaking of Mandalore. The on-the-ground stuff, or rather in-the-air stuff, with Bo-Katan and her forces, I thought was pretty good. The action was nice. I laughed when I saw the armorer go in with basically her tongs. And I also thought most of Mando's action was pretty good. There's a scene where, like, he takes down a guard and tries to grab for his pistol and just misses. That was really funny. There is the issue, though, when all of these characters have Beskar, you never really get a good sense of when a killing blow is coming. Like, how come this time him being struck with a weapon could perhaps be a deadly action? This is something I think The Mandalorian as a show has struggled with throughout the series, but it was extra relevant today when the Mando was fighting a bunch of other armored guards. I want to end this video with my positives and my future outlook, which is still positive. So before I go there, I do want to, start complaining again. I felt it very frustrating that this entire season we didn't see Din Djarin's face. It felt like a major step back in the character. I think the final scene where he's watching over Grogu would have been great for him to have his helmet off. That would have been pretty touching. And to that extent, I don't love that the difference between Mandalorian clans and Din Djarin being in a cult is essentially waved away at the end. We see that Bo-Katan has essentially become the new Mandalore. She's unified all the clans, but no one has had to really deal with their differences in a meaningful way. I'm also a little disappointed we never got back to Coruscant to fully explore more of Dr. Pershing's story. Yeah, that was a short part of the season, but I actually found it pretty compelling. It was in line with books like Alphabet Squadron, which presented an interesting idea of how Imperials after the Battle of Endor can try to make good, whether they can make good. How do you deal with their past atrocities? But I mean, I kind of figured that wasn't going to be relevant going into the finale, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. I also am not a huge fan of how this big thing that Moff Gideon's been working up to, his cloning project, was essentially flushed away. Now, there is a theory I've seen going around that I'm probably probably going to cover on the Clips channel. It points out that Gideon in season 2 has a mustache. The Gideon clones did not, nor did Gideon in this season. Could he still be a clone and be alive somewhere? I don't know. I think he does need to die after the season 1 and 2 fake outs, but I also hope that there's more to his project. Like, if it was literally just flushed away in a hallway, that's going to be disappointing. I had a few fan theories which I was also hoping to see addressed. For one, big part of the Mandalorian fleet wasn't at the battle. I was hoping they would come in with reinforcements. I thought that felt obvious. They did not. I think it would have been better to see Mandalorians from across the galaxy slowly making their way to battle. Boba Fett, Fen Rao, whoever else. That would have been a nice way, I think, to clean up the space battle, which, you know, never got resolved. But to be honest, it's the big thematic things and even the direction that bother me more than the lack of surprises or hints at future seasons or whatever else. I've always said the Mandalorian should be able to stand on its own. I wanted that this episode, and it had the opportunity. It just ultimately didn't at times. There's also maybe a bit more goofiness than normal with Moff Gideon and the Mandalorian having their scrap. Gideon is just completely absurd at this point. There's Grogu and the Praetorian Guards, but I don't really mind Goofy in Star Wars. I think some people will have that complaint. For me, it's fine. I did also like the destruction of the Darksaber. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Bo-Katan leads Mandalore without that. All right, so I want to move now to things I do like, because I spent a lot of time dissing on this episode. It wasn't all bad. I did like the sort of adoption scene between Grogu and the Mandalorian, although I didn't think it was necessary. Like, everyone assumed that the Mandalorian saw Grogu as a son. It's pretty much treated like that usually. It's official now. I like that Din Djarin has that different naming convention, so Grogu will be Din Grogu. And my biggest takeaway from this episode is that they did the right thing in sort of giving a bit of a soft reset. I don't want to say it's a reset because the Mandalore arc is going to be huge, but I like that Din actively, or I guess Din Djarin or Djarin, actively recused himself from it. He went back to his life as a bounty hunter, and he could still sort of rub shoulders with whatever's going on, given that he's offered his services essentially to the New Republic. But I like that the next season has the chance to really return to what made the Mando season 1. They're going to need to be really creative in thinking up an enemy or a threat or something that will be compelling enough without having the same galaxy-wide stakes. But they did that with Mando season 1 and Grogu. They've got to do something different this time, but I believe they can. I think it was what the show needed to do after the book of Boba Fett. I've said it a million times. I really liked the first 3 or 4 episodes of Boba Fett especially, but it was really hurt by the sort of mid-season Mando inclusion and the return of Grogu especially. That was a decision I didn't like. This season, I think, really suffered from that. Moving forward, I think they do have a chance to right the ship and have fixed what I think was a pretty major mistake, compounded with whatever issues arise from the canceling of Rangers of the New Republic. Overall, I'm still very hopeful for the future of The Mandalorian. This season didn't live up to the hype of season 1 or 2 for me. I was still very excited for this episode coming in, which is part of the reason why I was so disappointed. Like with other shows, if you don't enjoy it, you don't care when the finale's bad. This season had some lows, but I also generally enjoyed it, so I was hoping for more from the finale to make everything fit together better. Unfortunately, we just didn't get that. That, however, is just my opinion. I look forward to reading yours down below. The live reaction is still live. We talked for about half an hour beforehand, about 20 minutes afterwards. Feel free to watch that if you want, but for now, I'm out. Have a good one. May the Force be with you.